Today, Jerusalem's walls are actually breached by 7 working gates, and one gate that was purposely closed nearly 1,300 years ago. The obstructed gate is the beautiful Golden Gate, an entrance that was sealed off by Muslim conquerors, determined to stop the prophesied entry into the city by a Jewish Messiah. This gate remains clearly visible in the city walls, waiting for the dramatic events millions believe will precede the end of the world. In our first hour, we looked at the 4 gates that open to the spirit of the city, the gates most closely tied to Jerusalem's varied and contentious religious life. We traveled through the New Gate and the Lion's Gate, commonly used by the Christians who live in and travel to Jerusalem. The Lion's Gate in particular opens onto the sacred Via Dolorosa, the street Jesus walked to his crucifixion. The Damascus Gate, a beautiful structure now used by the masses of Muslim faithful heading to prayer at the mosque and holy sites on the Temple Mount. And the fascinating Dung Gate, which allows Jewish worshippers to walk to their most holy site, the Western Wall. Here, the Orthodox can be heard praying that the Jewish temple, which once graced this site, will someday be rebuilt. But there are 3 gates that tell the story of the warring and bloodshed that threaten Jerusalem even to this day. Gates that can tell stories of conflict and conquerors. This is the Zion Gate. It is scarred and pocked with Jordanian bullet holes. This gate bore the brunt of the conflict outside the city walls during the 6-Day War. Through the Jaffa Gate, recent European conquerors and foreign ideas forced their way into the city. And Herod's Gate. Here, 12th century crusaders surmounted the walls of the old city in their effort to wrest Jerusalem from Muslim control. The words are everywhere. In everyone's mind and on the tip of every tongue. The words are from the Bible. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. It has been a city that kings and rulers have longed to possess. Almost all have come from the north to stake their claim. David, Solomon, Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander the Great, Caesar, Herod, Suleiman the Magnificent, and Napoleon. How could so much blood be shed and so much misery inflicted over a city with almost no natural resources, no river access, no seaport, and far from any important trade route? What has made this city valuable in the eyes of almost all who have come here is not material riches or natural resources. It is, in one word, God. Throughout history, the world has believed that these are God's chosen hills. Some believe that by entering one of the stone gates of Jerusalem, the chosen are as close to God as they will ever be on this earth. In the book of Psalms, a poet sang of his love for the city. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I prefer not Jerusalem above my highest joys. Herod's Gate, called the Flower Gate in Arabic, is in the northeastern part of the city. Today it is an entrance into the Muslim quarter of the old city. The least impressive and most easily overlooked gate, it has witnessed the most spectacular invasions of Jerusalem. Herod's Gate is a structure that dates back to the 16th century, when the Turkish ruler Suleiman the Magnificent began rebuilding the city's walls and infrastructure. Herod's Gate now leads through a narrow layer of shops and homes of the Muslim quarter. There are some indications that earlier gates at this location might have led to the land of the Jewish tribes, Ephraim, and therefore might have been called the Ephraim Gate. But this cut in the old wall was later named for Herod the Great, who rebuilt the sacred Jewish temple shortly before the birth of Christ. Herod's gate's only liability is that it faces north, the direction from which Jerusalem's enemies seem to come. The idea that trouble often comes from the north wasn't a new concept for early residents of this ancient city. In fact, 600 years before the birth of Christ, the Jewish prophet Jeremiah predicted violent attacks from the north. For his unpopular predictions, Jeremiah's writings were burned, and he was banished to a cave, which is believed to be only a short distance from what is now Herod's Gate. The old prophet continued his writing and prophesying of future wars and pestilence, even after he was banished. In the old Jerusalem book that carries his name, Jeremiah predicted, "For disaster looms out of the north, even terrible destruction." And he was right. Over the walls near Herod's Gate came Nebuchadnezzar, banishing all in his wake. Over these walls came Titus to completely destroy Jewish civilization. Over these walls came Christian crusaders, unleashing the worst killing spree Jerusalem has ever known. And over these stones came Saladin, Sultan of Egypt, to drive out the Christians. Standing in the gates of Jerusalem, Jeremiah cut off his hair and cast it away, and predicted that all gladness and mirth would fail this city, and Jerusalem would be desolate. From the north they came, burning, pillaging, killing, and exiling. Alexander the Great walked through the gates of Jerusalem in 334 BC, not as a conqueror, but as a friend. Alexander, according to tradition, was greeted by the Jewish leaders and told how his arrival had been prophesied by Daniel. Alexander was so impressed he did not overthrow Jerusalem. He and the Greek Empire, which succeeded him, brought a new invasion of Western values to the city. Alexander the Great believed in a one-world civilization, a brotherhood of man in which all people were united in a similar cultural practice. It was an enlightened idea for its time, but it did not sit well with traditional Jewish faith. The Greeks were, for the most part, tolerant of many cultural practices of the people in their empire, and for a considerable time, Jewish and Greek colonies lived side by side in Jerusalem without much disagreement. Greece was an admired empire, exporting a way of life that was highly seductive to the young people of Jerusalem. Many Jews were taken in by the modern, cosmopolitan ways of the Greeks and readily integrated with them. Greek culture was an awesome force, and most educated Jews found it irresistible. The Greeks were magnificent architects, and they excelled in poetry, philosophy, theater, and other arts. As traders, none had matched them for 1,000 years. Greek culture, or Hellenism as it was known, promised Judea a glorious future, but it also threatened to destroy Judea. Slowly but surely, Jerusalem was transformed into a Hellenic city, adapting Greek lifestyles and institutions. But Greek culture was full of excesses, supported by mythology for its spiritual direction. To protect themselves from this polluting influence, the Jews began to put up walls and barriers to keep their culture separate from the Greeks. In response, the Greeks issued the first anti-Semitic writings during this era. Slowly, tensions began developing between these two cultures. When the Syrian Emperor Antiochus Epiphanes came to power, things became worse. Antiochus wanted the entire empire to be more Hellenic. Seeing the Jewish faith as ancient, backward, and an embarrassment to his vision for a glorious empire, Antiochus banned circumcision and recognition of the Sabbath.